Happy Monday afternoon, Life Group leaders. Since it is such a beautiful day today, we had a change of venue and I'm shooting this outside. If you are stuck inside today, then I feel really, really sorry for you. It is just gorgeous and I'm happy to get to do what I do. Thanks for letting me do it. We are kicking off a brand new series this week, and I know there was some trepidation for some with this whole series, the idea of being exposed and dealing with sin and confession and repentance, and it's not something that any of us enjoy, but something that we are commanded to do by God. And so we're going to talk about it and see what it looks like to live this out, because ultimately it's those things that set us free. Most of your people, they don't need more head knowledge. They need to know how to obey these things that God's told us to do. And so that's why we're doing it. And so hopefully you'll hang in there with us as we go through this series together. So this first sermon that we did yesterday, again, as I mentioned in the service, this is just the introduction to this series. And so much of what is going to be the application for this is going to come later on in the series, but this was the introduction. So we just set up the series yesterday by retelling and reminding ourselves of the story of David and Bathsheba. And so there isn't a whole lot that I feel like we need to add by way of the questions this week, but just one little bit of coaching that I wanted just to say is, don't assume that your group knows this story like you know this story. Okay, we all have, many of you've been in the church for a long time, but the reality is you have people in your group who have not. And so as you're talking about this story, don't assume everybody knows this story to the level that you do. It is a story that is told outside the church. Even people who aren't Christians know bits and pieces of this story. But just because this is an overly familiar story to you, don't assume that it's that way for everybody in your group. So take the time to kind of work through it, retell a few of the details, and ask people. One of the things that I like to do in my life group sometimes is just start the questions by just saying, what stood out to you this week in this story? Or what did God speak to you? What were you reminded of, or what did you see differently? And that is oftentimes a great jumping off point to allow people to get into the conversation about what God spoke to them just by hearing that story again. So we're just retelling the story, setting up the scene, and there's a lot of questions in here just to help us be thinking about how this story, there's some practical applications in it, things like being where you're supposed to be and not being where you're supposed to be, and how the trouble that causes. And everybody has a story like that. You have a story like that. If you were ever in high school, you have a story where you weren't where you were supposed to be and you got in trouble. Tell that story. That opens it up for other people to tell their story too. And you can go all the way down till we get to the end. The big thing is talking about sin, and ultimately that sin is always going to lead us further than we wanted to go, or take us further than we want to go, keep us longer than we wanted to stay, and cost us more than we wanted to pay. That was kind of the encompassing idea at the end of this, is we're just setting up the sin of this story that's going to lead us to a place of rebuke, lead us to a place of repentance, lead us to a place of confession and forgiveness. We're going to get to experience all of those things on the backside, but we don't get to experience the full joy of those things until we experience the pain of the sin itself. And so let's spend this week talking about this sin. And there's another saying that most people, they don't want to be set free from their sin. They want to be set free from the consequence of their sin. And that's something that we see here in David a little bit, and we'll get to talk about that a little bit more. But that's something to bring up in your group, that did it look like David in this point wants to be set free from his sin or from the consequence of his sin? We'll get there a little bit more, but we can't really feel the full weight of the grace that comes with forgiveness and repentance and confession until we feel the full weight of this sin. And so that's why we ended where we did today. I know it's not going to be fun. Nobody wants to talk about this stuff. And don't feel like you need to try to drag people out, whatever their sin is that they're dealing with. They don't need to confess all of that stuff yet. That may come up later on in the series, depending on your group. Don't make that the point tonight, or whatever your night that your group meets, but just talk about how one little sin has the ability to cause such great destruction in a person's life, and get on the same page of seeing sin as evil, and what do we need to do to get rid of it? That's where I want us to get tonight. So try to work that way through your group. I know it's not fun. It's not going to be easy, but you guys are great at understanding your group and the dynamics and the needs there, and hopefully you'll do that well. If you got any questions, give me a call or give Jeff a call. He'd love, or Ken, and they'd all love to help you in any way that we can. Love you guys. Thanks for what you do. We'll talk to you soon.